Open your Bibles to Daniel chapter 2 and 3. We've got to the iron and clay. Most recently we've been talking about the iron, if you would, the Roman Empire. And that, we're going to sort of wrap that up, or at least move forward from that this morning. But yeah, if you have that diagram, you're welcome to put that out. I should have brought these out here. Just put one on the tables. But the interpretation of that dream, moving through it over different kingdoms, starting with the head of gold, of course, Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonians, but the Medes and Persians would be coming shortly. That's the silver. Following that, the Greeks were going to show up, the brass, and following the Greeks was going to be the Romans. And that Roman Empire would break into pieces, so to speak, some strong, some weak. And we have been watching, of course, we have the beautiful view from the hindsight position. We can look back and see all this and see the interpretation unfolded in actual real history. And that, but the sovereignty of God all the way through, God used, and I want to remind you this vision that God gave of the history of the world to come, so to speak, is from His perspective. The focal point is the rock that will hit, that stone cut without hands out of the mountain is going to hit that. The focal point is the perspective of mankind being saved by the mercy and grace of God. That is like if you miss the point, you missed a big one. That is the point. Now, He's sovereign throughout history, and He's unraveling it for Nebuchadnezzar at the time. Of course, Daniel is interpreting. But He's unraveling this. I've said it so often, but it's profound. Never before in the history of mankind, in the history of the universe, the cosmos, has God stepped in and said, this is how it's going to unfold. And He does it to Nebuchadnezzar. And He gives him this amazing dream, which, of course, Daniel interprets for him. And each of these successive kingdoms, they're going to overtake the previous kingdom, and then they're going to rule, and then another kingdom is going to come and overtake them, and so forth, all the way down until the rock hits. It's done then. That kingdom is also kingdom, the rock, but that is going to be God's kingdom established through the grace and mercy of God and the work of Jesus Christ on the cross. And that imagery of it just hitting and everything else. If you are not, this is what we talked about last week a bit, you and I, God would have us be in the rock. In the rock. Not anywhere outside of it. Because the rock does the damage when it hits, and then that rock becomes this mountain. You want to be in the rock. You want to be in Christ. Right? The New Testament speaks often of that, being in Christ. This is the place that any observer of this dream would want to be. That's where they should be. If you look at the story, where do you want to be in the story? You want to be in the rock. That becomes that final kingdom. There's no other kingdom that comes after. Nothing succeeds that final kingdom. But God's sovereignty is being worked out kingdom by kingdom. So the Babylonians were used of God. They knew as much. Even they were sent in. Remember, God said to the Israelites, to Judah, their Babylonians are coming. You just go with them. If you want to live, you don't fight. We're done. This thing's done. You go with them. The Babylonians were used of God to put them into exile, right? Which they did. And for the 70 years. And the Medes and Persians are coming. The Medes and Persians, listen, the Babylonians had this idea of just sort of, capture the land and take people out and put other people in and that kind of, which had been done by the Assyrians as well. But the Medes and Persians, they said, you know what? They can keep their land. The people will be much more amiable and better able to pay taxes and tribute if we let them keep their own place. We dominate them, but they can hang out there and they can even practice their own religion. That is what the Medes and Persians allowed. God used them to move Israel back. Judah and Benjamin, they moved them back into Israel. That's what he used them for. Right? And now, what's going to happen after that? So Alexander the Great's going to come in. And in 13 years is going to dominate the world. It's crazy. And what he's going to do, every place he conquers, he's going to instill that they are forced to learn the Greek language. Everybody. And Greek philosophy. He's going to make a common element of language. Who messed up the language? God did. Many years ago, right? Why? Because if we get too many stupid people talking the same language, we do really stupid things. That's why. Take a look at the world today. Right? That's what's happening. So now, God confounded their language. Now, the Greeks have come in and they're making a common language. Also, the communication is a different thing now. People from different countries can speak the same language and communicate. If you have a dumb idea, you can pass it on to your dumb neighbor. And vice versa. And so God used them to do that. Now the Romans conquered the Greeks. And they kept, by the way, they kept the Greek language for many, many years. What did they eventually change it to? Latin. Any influence of that left over? Oh my goodness. You ever tried to figure out what a potato is actually called? Latin for potato. See? I knew it.
Where the English language comes from.
What?
Where the English language comes from.
Yeah, it does.
I prefer each other.
The
Sounds more like a
German.
potato.
Yeah, exactly. Well, of course, he's going to use the Romans as well. And that's where we're at. We're looking at that. I'm going to give you a little overview again of what we talked about. But Pax Romana is something that the Romans put in place, and it simply meant the peace of Rome. I get this concept. I just want it peaceful. Right? Don't rock the boat, is what they wanted. They had conquered, and they just said, now, how are we going to sort of just keep it peace? They did it with an iron hand. That's how they kept peace. But with that peace, things are being set in place. Okay, so let's see. I'm going to, in particular, this stands out. Pax Romana lasted from the reign of Caesar Augustus, that's in 27 BC, all the way through Caesar Aurelius, 180. 27 BC to 180 AD. Do you know what that encompasses? The entire nativity through the birth of the first century church of God. And what is in that time? Seriously relative peace. And you know what else is in place? Well, common language, right? Greeks they've got Greek languages all over the place. They've got it. And the Romans were great at figuring some mechanical stuff out. Some pretty ingenious, right? Very clever guys. The Romans created concrete. Really? Yep. There are still concrete roads that they built that are still being used today. How long does your TV last? Needed the Romans to build it. But they put, and architecturally, there's still concepts that they developed that are still being used today. The arch, right? How to distribute the forces, weight, right? That kind of stuff. Amazing stuff. But again, we want to look at, and as important as all those are, God is looking at it from his perspective. All of this, right? Remember I said this. This reveals the history of mankind from Nebuchadnezzar's time till the end from God's perspective. Who's going to be in the rock? there is other kingdoms floating around on earth at the time that are not represented here. Because they are not in the, if you would, in the lineage of influence for God's people. They're on the outside, the fringes kind of stuff. That doesn't mean that they're not going to come into play. Like with that at that end time, there's going to be those other players show up. That's not what I'm saying. In this timeline, what's revealed here, the kingdoms of earth until the kingdom of God is set up. Everything else has to fit into this timeline. Remember, this is it. This is the one. And what God is doing all the way through with these allowing these different kings to come in, these kingdoms, to have sovereignty at the time on earth, is he's preparing always for the same purpose, the message of Jesus Christ, the gospel, to move about. Now, you'll know this enough by heart or just from hearing it so often, but John starts his gospel how? In the beginning was the Word. That is Logos, right? This is already, and Pastor talked about this some weeks ago, but this is already great influence of that Greek philosophy of Logos, and also the Greek language, because everybody understands this, both the Greek and the Gentiles are going to understand what John is unfolding here with this concept. In the beginning was the Word. Now, this has always been a mystery to me. It's been a mystery to a lot of people, but why, if you're going to do this wonderful thing about the gospel, to get it out so people can be saved, right? Because that is his purpose. You could, if you're God, do it anyway. And yet, the way that is clearly revealed is that he wants mankind to use this tool to speak words, his words, that other people would hear it and get saved. Really? Don't you think writing it, use an early century sky plane or something, and then write it in the sky so that all the world could see it? Everybody. That's not how he decided to do it. He's going to decide to do it by taking his creation, us, with his creation, the Word, and to speak that Word out. In the beginning was the Word, right? And the Word was with God, and the Word was God. This wasn't a sort of a haphazard decision of his. This is from the beginning. He was known as the Word. Logos. This is something you speak. This is something you hear. This is something people read, they understand. It has a meaning. Words. Now how are you going to move that about? Well, again, why not have people fly or something so they move around easier? But that's not how we move. How do we move? Well, how did he design us to move? With legs. And then you have some brilliant guy that comes up with a wheel, right? Then you have the really brilliant guy that comes up with an internal combustion engine. Now we're talking, right? Now we're there. But God knew all that, but he wants, what is he going to put in place? He's going to put in place things to move words and people. Doesn't sound like rocket science. If that's the way he wants to use his message, how the tools that he wants to use to get his message out. So guess what the Romans do? Are they working for God? Well, they don't know it, but yes, they are working for God. And it is, like writing it in the sky would be, the brilliant, miraculous, supernatural thing that would be done in an instant. Do you know how long it takes to make a road 100 miles long if you're laying brick by brick by brick by brick by brick? Tedious work. And he has an empire doing it. The sovereignty of God is being is being revealed a brick at a time when they're making these cobblestone streets and they're making places where what? Where wheels can move easier. Horses can move easier. Carts, humans can move physically from one place to the other. I can think of, well, at least one. I can think of Philip. He's in the desert, and all of a sudden he finds himself where, someplace else. I mean, I like that, right? But that's not. That was an oddity. That's not generally how God moves His people around. He gave you legs, use them, right? He gave you a mouth, use it. This is His decision. And now He has put in place Pax Romana, if you would. Because they've got to get things done. His way, God's way. And these Romans are going to do a lot of this work. So, let's see. He had, how did Paul get his message out? Well, he traveled, first of all, right? What did he do after he traveled? He wrote words on a piece of paper and handed it to a guy with legs, right? And then how did that move? Well, just the way people move things. Maybe with a donkey, maybe a horse, maybe a camel, maybe a ship, maybe what, but it had to move physically from one place to the other. And guess what Rome was doing? They were putting an infrastructure in place to move things from one place to the other with human invention. And that's what God is unloading here. Language. Greek had been the common language used throughout the Roman Empire, the early church, right? Now, okay, listen to this. Didn't God, the book of Acts, for instance, suddenly everybody heard the preaching in their own language, right? So He can do that. God can do that. But that's not what He chose to do, generally. What did He choose to do? Well, He had the Greeks come in and everybody had to learn Greek. Right? So He could have done it the other way because He proved He can do it any way He wants. But that's not. Have you ever realized that God likes to do things that you would and I would consider utterly tedious? Yeah. Absolutely. Is your life ever tedious? Does it look like it's just moving at a snail's pace? It's not moving, it's not growing, it's not. Well, that's not true.
He stalls you so you can catch up with Him.
That's it. Yeah, I like it. Yes, He stalls so we can catch up with Him. Okay. Now, Rome was also generally tolerant when it came to religious matters, just like some of their predecessors. They didn't care as long as everybody just didn't disturb the peace. They didn't care what Jesus Christ was teaching. They didn't care what Paul was preaching. They didn't care as long as they didn't disturb the peace. And even when they disturb the peace, they go, well, hey, what's up with the big deal? Like, what's the big deal? We don't find any fault in Him. What's your problem? But because of the uprising, right? Now, who knew that if they caused enough disturbing of the peace, the Romans would do something? Well, Satan knew that. He knew the buttons. He knew which button to push to cause the Romans to do something. And so he pushed that button again and again and again and again until that it was just an uprising. And everybody wants peace. You know how this works. It goes down the chain of command. This is your jurisdiction, buddy. Remember the Pilate Caesar thing? You're kicking it back and forth. Who wants to play this game? It's your place. They're uprising there. Right? Stamp it down. I don't want to go tell my superiors that there's a problem over there. Take care of it. That was the pressure, right? And the Jews, of course, were stirring it up. Satan was stirring it up. Anyways, in general, they were tolerant, but don't disturb the peace. So they were allowed, even in Paul's time, they were allowed to preach, evangelize, and so forth. The Romans didn't care. as long as you don't disturb the peace. That's when it came into an issue, right? And even then, of course, the Rome thing we talked about this the other time, the Rome thing with Trump, Paul is to say, hey, you guys want to do all this, I'm a Roman citizen, don't you think you should have at least a trial, before you execute judgment? They go, whoa, we didn't know you were Roman. And all of a sudden, the whole game changed. Why? Because of Pax Romana. You don't mess with the Roman citizens, okay? We got laws, we got rules and stuff like that, and we're going to put in place. In general, by the way, of course, the Roman idea was a republic. They had senators. Rome had senators, just like the U.S. has senators, for exactly the same reason. That's the model. The model that was used back here. So what? They wanted a representation of the people in general over their whole kingdom. Representatives of those would come to a central localized government location. That's the idea. So you get
They had Bible leaders, just like we do now.
and you have this clay and iron mix now. We're still there. This is that last piece. That's where we're at. It's all these little clay iron pieces. There's some that are strong. There's some that are not so strong, right? There's some that are really muddy. Clay, right? But that's it. That's where we are. It's an all extension of this stuff. That there's sort of that Eastern strain, if you will, from Rome, and the Western strain, but it's all there. It's just in these different pieces. Okay. So, now, that is, in general, I'll read this summary. In summary, the Pax Romana provided ease of travel due to well-developed and maintained road systems. Safety in that travel due to the absence of warfare, because in general they had peace, and they had this stepped-up crime prevention system. Hang them on a cross. That'll get their attention, right? That'll do it. So, and then of course they had extensive use of the Greek language across all their conquered kingdom. And eventually they would use that and put Latin into place, Romans later on. And they did the same thing there. It was just worldwide language. They got it in place. Now, it was if you would, an environment for the early church to blossom, to move it out physically, tediously, if you would. But it was all by the sovereignty of God. Now, okay, I want to take you back into Daniel now. Let's go in there. The sovereignty of God. Let's just pick it up on verse 46. This is after all the interpretation has been done. Verse 46 of chapter 2. Then the king Nebuchadnezzar fell on his face and worshipped Daniel and commanded that they should offer an oblation and sweet odors unto him. The king answered unto Daniel and said, Of a truth it is that your God is a God of gods. Pause there. Now, remember, the whole world, wow, we got it's sagging there. Our world is sagging. But the whole world was to see the Israelites' God as God. That's what this was for. The city on a hill, talked about that 100 times. That's what God's intent was. For the same purpose. That because they would come to Jerusalem and see this God of gods, they would find the Messiah who was going to come from that God of gods, to be the Savior of the world. That is the message that Nebuchadnezzar just realized is the one that was supposed to have come through this process. We got no remedy now. We're done. I'm going to take it down to a single man, Daniel. We're going to focus in like a laser beam on his life right now. One man sold out to God to do his will, to be used of God as a vessel of honor for the purpose of the gospel. All things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are called according to his purpose. That's a Daniel. Right there. But he's going to use all things around him. And he's unfolding what's all things? Well, all the stuff that's coming. Right? the Medes and Persians, the Greeks, the Romans, all the way down. He's going to use all of that. And it's just like a epiphany. God, it's just, whoa. This Nebuchadnezzar, this heathen king, says exactly the truth. I mean, it comes right out of his own mouth. Of a truth it is that your God is a God of gods. That was the point. That was the point. And God wanted to use the nation of Israel to do that, to get that message out, and now that remedy, there was no remedy for that. We're going to go to the individual, and now he's using the individual, and he just, wow, does he get it done? Nebuchadnezzar, these words come out of this guy. He's the Lord of Lords, the Lord of Kings rather, a revealer of secrets, seeing thou couldst reveal the secret. He got it. He recognized what God had just done. The God of gods, right, had done with him and Daniel, revealing it. So then the king made Daniel a great man. So now God uses, of course, all this to put Daniel in this place of prominence, which is going to last through the first two kingdoms. Well, not all the way through the Medes and Persians, of course, but into the Medes and Persians kingdom. But he's going to be raised to power. He was a ruler over the whole province of Babylon and chief of the governors over all the wise men. You note that, because that's going to be a jealousy, right? Doesn't matter how you got to the top. The people that aren't on the top are going to want to be there, and they're going to be jealous of your position. This is the world system, right? They're going to be jealous of that, and they're going to want that position. This was given to him by God. Doesn't matter who gave it to you. It's still going to be an envy thing. It will become that. And then verse 49, then Daniel requested of the king and set Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego over the affairs of the province of Babylon. But Daniel sat in the gate of the king. And now chapter 3 opens. We've talked about this a few times already. This is how good mankind's memory is. You go to bed, you wake up the next day, you forget the big significance of the deal, but what floats to the top is this self-promotion, this self-absorbed, this self-centered, this self-acting, fleshly response. And of all that absolute profoundness, you wake up in the morning and you go, I got a great idea. I like the thing that I was gold at the top. But I think it could be better. I think it should be all me and all gold. Don't you think that's a great idea, guys? This is your flesh, my flesh, taking absolute profound revelation of God to mankind, stepping into Earth's history, mankind's history, the cosmos history, revealing something that's never been revealed before, absolutely profound, and then you take it, you sleep on it, and you wake up the next day and go, I think we should make a gold idol, totally looking like me, and 90 feet tall, so nobody can miss it. And I think everybody can bow down to it. How in the world do you get there? How do you get from A to B? You look at this, you shake your head, but you know, this is the mirror thing, right? Our capacity to mess up what God has revealed to us is almost unfathomable. we have great ability in this arena. Let's do this one. So he's going to go, and it just goes. The breadth thereof 6 cubits. You're going to put it in the plain, so there's nothing in the way, no mountains to obscure it, kind of thing. Then Nebuchadnezzar the king sent to gather together the princes, the governors, the captains, the judges, the treasurers, the counselors, the sheriff, and all the rulers of the provinces come at the dedication of the image. Now, I don't know, this has always been a curiosity today, and I did a search on this. I couldn't really find any great information on it, but what's with all the lists in Daniel? Right? I mean, he lists it tediously. I don't know. Right? I mean, this whole list I just read to you, you're going to have to read that about 3 times or 4 times, whatever he's going to do. You're going to have to read it again, right? And then the same with the instruments. He lists every instrument. You just said the instruments, right? Usually they don't even bother. They just make music. Okay? He lists it all. But at least one thing, it seems, if I look through this, and the one comment, I agreed with this, you know, there's not a, again, what they're looking at is an organization of mankind, right? It's some kind of a social construct so that you can have some peace and order, right? Kind of thing. Well, every authority is listed. So there was no excuse. I mean, he's going down, I don't know whether, I'm assuming you're going down the line, right? He starts with princes and then governors, captains, judges, treasurers, counselors, sheriffs, and all the rulers of the provinces. And so he's just like named everybody in authority. So everybody's going to come, and nobody's going to have an excuse. Oh, I didn't know about that, right? They're all going to be responsible. He takes them all, everybody, the whole list. And what are they supposed to do? Well, okay, then the princes, he's going to go again, verse 3. Then the princes, and here's the whole list, were gathered together unto the dedication of the image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. And they stood before the image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Then a herald cried aloud, to you it's commanded, O people, nations, languages, that at what time ye hear the sound, and I was going to go through another list, cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, dulcimer, all the way down, all kinds of music. You fall down and worship the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king hath set up. We want to demand attention and honor. This is part of your fleshly fall thing. By the way, I should have clarified this a bit. If you want to sort of get a good idea of what your flesh looks like if it was just left to itself, find someone that has essentially ultimate power on earth and check out his actions. Because if you had all power on earth and without the Lord, this is what you would look like. 99.99% sure. Now there might be a little bit of wavering on the final outcome. But left to yourself with ultimate power, just go take a look. Go look at one. What they're doing, you say, I could never do that. Well, that's not probably true. You just don't have all power. Now the problem, it would be great if it just stopped at the saved, unsaved thing. Do you know that there are saved, born again leaders that have been twisted by power? Right? Power corrupts. Ultimate, what do they say? Ultimate power corrupts ultimately, or something like that.
Absolute power.
There we go. Thank you. Absolute power corrupts absolute. So, I wish it was just limited to the unsaved world. It is not. Why? Because when you got saved, you drug along this piece of flesh thing with you. And it's got this attitude. So if you read your Bible and you see some guy who is obviously not a child of God and acting in a way, it's still going to tell you something. There's something to watch out for. You actually really like to be honored. You would like people to really glorify you. You want attention. You want to stand out in a crowd. You want to stand in a valley and everybody see you, despite whatever is around. This is the challenge. And it didn't go away when you got saved. In fact, this is Satan's tool to take you down. The world, the flesh, and the devil. See, Satan, this is crazy stuff. He's got an ally living in every born-again believer, every Christian on the face of this earth. And all he's got to do is press some buttons. He's trying to get that thing to rise up. Just like he did with the Jews. He knew what Rome wouldn't tolerate, right? Well, he's pressing buttons, trying to push. Because if he can make that thing rise up in you, in that born-again believer, he can sort of, put you in neutral. not not allow you to move the kingdom forward. Which kingdom? The one that really matters, that rock thing. That's what he's after. Let's go on. Verse 5. So what time you hear it, he goes through the whole list again, verse 5 there. You're supposed to fall down and worship the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king has set up. And, just so you do this voluntarily, whoso falleth not down and worship shall the same hour be cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. Okay, therefore at that time when all the people heard the sound of the cornet, and it goes through the whole list again, and the music, they fell down and worshipped the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. Wherefore at that time certain Chaldeans came near. Do you know where the Chaldeans were in that lineup of people that Daniel became governor over? Yeah, the wise men. Chaldeans were part of that group, that social elite group. They were known as the magicians, the scientists of the day, and they are going, okay, you know what? I think we got an opening here. So they're going to come and they're going to say, they're going to accuse the Jews. So they spake and said to the king, this is verse 9, Nebuchadnezzar, O king, live forever. A little bit of, what do they call that? Flattery. Right? We're just doing this for your good, by the way. That's why they're saying it. It had nothing to do with any personal gain on their part. Okay? This is just for everybody's good here. They spake and said to the king, Nebuchadnezzar, live forever. Thou, king, made a decree that every man shall hear the sound of the cornet, and he goes through all the list. They're supposed to fall down, worship the golden image, and whoever, by the way, you said if they don't, they're supposed to be cast into the midst of a burning fire furnace. Now, verse 12, they come to the crux. There are certain Jews whom thou hast set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, have not regarded thee. They serve not thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. Okay, so we're going to end there. We're going to go on from that. We don't know where Daniel is in this chapter. He's not showed. He doesn't show up here as one of those that didn't bow down. That doesn't mean in any way that he bowed down. It just appears that he was looking at the affairs of state somewhere else. He wasn't in the capital, so to speak. But nevertheless, his representatives are there, and they're not bowing down, and it's been observed. Now, I'm going to do a little pause button on this, and that's because I want to reiterate something before we go on. Nebuchadnezzar is God's tool in this whole unfolding of the history of mankind to come, kind of thing. He's at the top. He's the gold head, right? And now chapter 3, we're getting to see the real man. He had a glimpse of truth. Previous chapter, he said that's the God of gods. He slept on it. He figured out he's actually God of gods the next morning or something. And now he's off running again with that theme, right? But God is still going to use him. One of the biggest points of the book of Daniel is, again, the sovereignty of God and all of the mess of this world. God is not a God that is only so big that he's limited to the people that will obey him and to work it out that way. He is not. He can do it. He can do it however he will. And he's going to use what he has to work with. And if he has to work with a super arrogant leader, he'll do that. Can God work with super arrogant leaders? Narcissistic types? Yes. Yeah, absolutely. You know what? This was actually fun in my in Bible reading, apart from my Daniel reading stuff. I came across this passage. If you want to, you can turn to the book of Judges, because this is pretty fun. I mean, that's not fun. But come to Judges chapter 6, because I came across what I said. Hey, that's sort of a parallel to what's going on with Daniel and Nebuchadnezzar. It's in a different way, but there's a lot of similarities. What struck me again was that God likes to, he changes things up, but he also uses things that he's done before. I mean, in terms of I don't know, it must be fun for him. how he decides to do it. But it's like he tweaks it this way and that way kind of thing. But I'll tell you what I mean in a bit. But come to, I guess, chapter 6. Yeah, chapter 6 of Judges. I'll just start off right in the beginning. And the children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord delivered them into the hand of Midian 7 years. And this was the theme of the Judges. They did poorly. God spanked them with a certain with a certain enemy kingdom that came in, and then he would rise up a judge, a leader, and then they would have a period of rest from their enemies. But then they would quickly fall again, and then God would send in another punishment nation. That's what's happening here. So, come down to verse 11. It says, "And there came an angel of the Lord and sat under an oak which was in Ophrah, that pertained unto Joash the Abiezrite. And his son Gideon threshed wheat in the winepress to hide it from the Midianites." Okay, so he's a farmer, but he's sort of a chicken farmer. He's not a chicken farmer. He's not that brave a farmer, but for good reason, right? It says, "And the angel of the Lord appeared unto him and said unto him, The Lord is with thee, thou mighty man of valor." Okay, there's all sorts there. We're not going to go on that. "And Gideon said unto him, O my Lord, if the Lord be with us, then why is all this befallen us? And where be all his miracles which our fathers told us of, saying, Did not the Lord bring us up from Egypt? But now the Lord hath forsaken us." I love all that passage, but haven't you ever said that in your life? Okay, God. I've read about all this stuff and all the great things that you've done. Where exactly are you? Because it doesn't seem like you're around in my life, kind of thing. Have you ever done that? I don't know. I've done that. Okay. But moving on. "So the Lord looked upon him and said, Go in this thy might, and thou shalt save Israel from the hand of the Midianites. Have not I sent thee? And he said, O my Lord, wherewith shall I save Israel? Behold, my family is poor in Manasseh, and I am the least in my father's house." How many times did you hear that? It looks like that's who God picks, right? This repetition. If he's going to pick somebody, this looks like he looks for the weakest tribe, looks for the weakest family in the tribe, looks for the weakest guy in the family, right? That's sort of what Gideon's saying. Why would you choose me? I'm sort of down the totem pole quite a ways, right? Okay, we're sort of getting the context of this thing. And then, this is, of course, where he does the fleecing. Gideon does. Okay, if this is true, do the fleece thing this way and then do the fleece thing that way, right? We got all that. So, and God, of course, does that. So then, come now to chapter 7. So then, Jerubbaal, who is Gideon, and all the people that were with him rose up early and pitched beside the well Harod, so that the host of the Midianites were on the north side of them by the hill of Morah, in the valley. And the Lord said unto Gideon, The people that are with thee are too many. So he's going to go through this filtering process, right? He's going to take them down to 300, right? We know that story. So now, verse 7. Chapter 7, verse 7. The Lord said unto Gideon, By these 300 men, at last will I save you, and deliver the Midianites into thy hand, and let all the other people go. So, verse 8, all the people took their victuals in their hand, and the trumpets, and they sent all the rest of Israel, every man to his tent, and retained those 300 men. And the host of Midian was beneath him in the valley. It came to pass the same night. Now here's our focus. Watch this. So it came past the same night that the Lord said unto him, Arise, get thee down unto the host, for I have delivered it into thine hand. Right? Now he's sending Gideon down to spy on the enemy. You tell him to go, right? And it says, But if thou fear to go down, take with thee Phurah, thy servant, down to the host. So you can take one guy with you if you're too scared to go by yourself. And thou shalt hear, listen, and thou shalt hear what they say. I'm going to let you eavesdrop, and you're going to overhear something that I want you to hear. Tells him this. So, and afterward shall thine hands be strengthened to go down unto the host. Then went he down with Purah. So apparently he was too afraid to go by himself, right? And his servant, he went out to the outside of the armed men that were in the host, our watch. And the Midianites and the Amalekites and all the children of the east lay along the valley like grasshoppers for multitude. Their camels were without number as the sand of the sea, in verse 13. And when Gideon was come, so now he's in place, there was a man that told a dream unto his fellow. Okay? He's eavesdropping. He's going to hear a conversation with two guys. So the first guy starts out, he says, I had the weirdest dream last night. He starts telling him the dream. So he says, I dreamed a dream, and lo, a cake of barley bread tumbled into the host of Midian, and came into a tent and smote it that it fell, and overturned it, and the tent lay along flat. And his fellow answered and said, This is nothing else save the sword of Gideon, the son of Joash, a man of Israel, for into his hand God hath delivered Midian and all the host. Okay. Now, this is weird. Okay? But God is having fun. I think God's just having fun. I mean, in a respectful way. Look, Gideon is afraid. We know that. And he's supposed to step out for God, and he's had too many men. He's been reduced down to 300, and he's supposed to go and do this thing now for God. And it's going to take a lot of faith. It's going to take a lot of courage. It's going to take a lot of trust in doing something that looks totally stupid to mankind. This is just dumb, Gideon. This is not wise. There's nothing brilliant about this plan. You got 300. They couldn't count the camels. Okay? So then God tells them, okay, I want you to go spy on the camel tonight. You're going to hear something. Okay, so he goes down, he goes down, and he hears this guy saying, you know, I had this really crazy dream last night. This hunk of bread rolls into the Midian camp. And you go, what do you think? What's up with that? And the other guy doesn't flinch. And just like Daniel, he knows the interpretation of the dream. What would you say if a hunk of bread rolled into your camp? Ooh, scary. No, that's not scary. Maybe we get some food tomorrow. I don't know. It's not, look, the dream could have been this ferocious lion comes flying into, you know, into the Midianites and devours us all. Judah, lion, maybe, I don't know, maybe that's it. A hunk of bread rolls in, right? And, okay, so first of all, who put the dream in the guy's head? God did. Who gave the interpretation to the other guy? God did. This is an exact parallel of Daniel and Nebuchadnezzar. God puts the dream in Nebuchadnezzar's head, he puts the interpretation in Daniel's head. Now, I don't know about you, but I wouldn't come up with a really scary interpretation. I dreamed a dream of barley bread tumbled into the host of Midian. Smoke. Okay. This guy, like I said, doesn't flinch. He says, well, that's Gideon. How does he know it's Gideon? And what's with the barley bread? Well, where did the angel of the Lord find him? Well, he's a farmer. He's a chicken farmer. He's a farmer. He's crushing out wheat. They make bread out of wheat. Barley, right? Yeah. So God used this little... Now, what's this? So he says, he tells him the dream, right, in verse 14. Are we at the end? Oh my goodness. And it was so when Gideon heard the telling of the dream and the interpretation thereof, that he worshipped and returned to the host of Israel. You and I are standing eavesdropping on God. You're eavesdropping. God sent a dream to Nebuchadnezzar, gave the interpretation to Daniel, and you're sitting close by, and you're eavesdropping. And you just heard what God's going to do. And just like Gideon, you can walk away now, and there's going to be two reactions. You can be like the soldiers of Midian now, and be, oh goodness, what's happening? They're going to win. Gideon's going to come in and win. They should be terrified. But if you're a child of God, you're on the other side. You're just like with Gideon. You're going, we're going to win. We're going to win. Isn't that amazing? God lets you eavesdrop on the rest of the history of mankind. You're going to win. You should be worshiping God, right? Just like Gideon did, praising Him that you're on the winning side. This is going to work out okay.
And fighting.
And fighting. It's going to work out. And you might have to do some pretty idiotic things. Stand on a hill, scream, break a jar, right? Act scary, but not actually kill anybody. They did it themselves. Anyways, it's amazing. Okay, Lord, thank you for your word again, the beauty of it. Teach us through it, Lord, all this that you have revealed. Thank you for letting us eavesdrop and to hear what you're going to do. And I pray that you would just be with us in it. Help us to do our part, whatever it is you're asking of us, regardless of how ridiculous it looks to the world. Help us to be available, to be Gideon's, Daniel's in your world. In Jesus' name.